Well, welcome back to All Things Parking with Dani and John. How's it going?
How you doing,
John?
Dani? What's going on?
It's a beautiful day. Today is also an incredibly special day for a few different reasons. We have in the house our very first guest, Mr. Scott Souder. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dani. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always have a good time being with you and John.
Welcome, Scott. How are you?
I'm great.
We're so
Just
excited
off of
to have
vacation.
you.
Just off of vacation.
Nice. I can't wait to hear about that.
Secondly, happy birthday, Conway. It is your birthday.
My birthday. I stopped having birthdays like 10 years ago. Sorry.
You know, I apologize. I was, of course, running late this morning. No surprise there. I had a cake, champagne, forgot it. So my apologies on that, but happy birthday.
Yeah,
I know that you had a wonderful celebration over the weekend because you missed our cookout at Joe's. So
I did. I had, it's kind of a tradition to go golfing on my birthday or the weekend before with a bunch of buddies. And it's always a good time. We go up the hill and have some fun. So
I'm glad you had a good.
But I'm kind of glad you didn't bring some cake because it's just a reminder that I'm a year older. Another year.
Birthdays are always special. You should always celebrate your birthday, no matter what.
So again, as Dani said, today's kind of an exciting day. We got our first guest, Mr. Scott Souder, who, for those of you who don't know, is a legend in the Denver market, one of the first integrators that goes way back, at least with me, probably 25 years. Mountain Parking, which he's officially retired now.
Officially, yes.
Yeah, so this interview's kind of about life after parking. Interested to hear about, what it's like to not be in parking anymore. Although you'll probably always be in parking, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, you can't help when you go visiting someplace like Milwaukee or Madison, Wisconsin or whatever. You notice how the pay machines are, the gates, the brands. You can't help it. You just notice that, and this is laid out wrong. What are they doing on the street? Who's the, that's the operator? Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Once it's in your blood, you can't change.
Yeah, so you're like me. When we're on vacation, my wife's going, are you really going to that parking garage and looking?
I am.
Like,
Always.
yes, I sure am.
Always.
Just give me a minute, honey.
So when you travel, I mean, your family's used to the parking industry. You've been in it for a really long time. Zach is in it. When I travel, I'm always like, we have to look for paid parking. I don't want free parking. Let's look for some paid parking because I'm all about the experience. I want to go through the full experience. John, is that the same kind of experience for you, or?
I've kind of evolved at this. Now I'm looking for compliance. So I go and try to push the limit everywhere I go. Try to get out, try to not pay, try to do all kinds of things. So, but still I'm, walking around looking at these facilities and different parking operations. It's kind of like, it's still the operator in me is still there, noticing.
How often do you get tickets, and how often do you fight them?
I don't fight them at all. I pay them and I expense it because it's, I look at it as, research.
That's about the process.
Business development, understanding what's going on. So, but let's talk about, we're here because of Scott today. And again, as I said before, it's an amazing story, what I think of success. And so entrepreneur, how far do you go back?
In talking with other friends in the parking industry, they say that I trained them in Sacramento on federal equipment in 1985.
So 1985, wow.
It's incredible.
I remember working on a mono equipment was my first, and it was machine readable. We met with the representatives from Amano, these Japanese gentlemen. They asked if I had the ability to fix this piece of equipment, and I just kind of chuckled. And the guy I worked with, Steve, said, he can fix anything. He knows how to use an oscilloscope, which it was. I opened up the cabinet, started working with this ticket dispenser, and boom, got it working. It was machine readable, so you'd stick the ticket in, it had these holes punched in it, and it would automatically enter the date and time of entry, and then it would charge with the fee computer and a mono fee
So there were computers back then?
Fee computers, yeah.
Was it a TRS-80?
No, these were a mono TF 705s. And we moved to Denver. They were TF 710s. And we converted them to 5030s, which brings me to Inga.
Inga Hamilton. Yeah, before we get to Inga.
Yeah,
though,
no, but that's yeah.
You mentioned a guy, Steve.
Yes.
Is that Steve from Data Park?
Steve Harlambu from Data Park, yes.
Yeah, so you originally started with Data Park and Steve, right?
Yeah, I worked for Steve. He had a partner named Ron. I started working for them in late 84, 85. And we did this parking thing, and having lunch with Steve one day, he goes, we should do this. We could make software. This is 1984, 85. Windows was just coming out. And I quit working for him. I took a year off, went backpacking. He found my brother-in-law and called me on Vancouver Island and said, I want you to come back. I've got a programmer. We're going to build a company, and we're going to be in parking. You need to come back. So I went back to the Bay Area, and that's what we did.
Bay Area. So Souder Stockton garage.
Souder Stockton was my first garage.
That was I made a trip to Souder Stockton to look at equipment back in 95 and was just shocked at an operation that big. We didn't have parking like that in Denver.
No. And just when we came to Denver and with these honor boxes and rolling up dollars, I'd never seen anything like it. And that's why I thought technology to Denver, this will be a good time.
Which, those otter boxes, they still exist.
Yes, they do.
in some surface lots, which is really surprising. So,
yes.
So for those of you who don't know your wife, Mary,
yes,
who's probably the real boss of
the
operation.
That's how it usually is.
So how did you convince Mary to pack up and move to Colorado?
Well, the kids were about to start school, and we're not from California. Great place to be, but we decided we wanted to move and raise them someplace else. And when I got out of the military, she always wanted to live in a city. So we settled in San Francisco, out near the Sunset District. And then when I went backpacking, we came back, we lived in Hayward. And then as Zach was about 4 or 5, we decided we needed to move, and I always wanted to move to Colorado. So here we came. And then we get here in 93, and she's like, now what are you going to do? So I almost went to work for Apple as a tech or doing some other tech, and I got a call from Berlin they were a booth manufacturer, and they asked me if I'd go out there and put in the spikes and stuff at 3 of the rental cars because they were behind. They were moving the rental cars from in the garages out to this 78th Ave or whatever it was. And so I said, sure. And about that same time, the guys from Amano said, we're having some equipment failures at the Performing Arts Garage. Could you swing by there and take a look at it? So by the time I got through 93, I was
you were back in parking.
Full in parking. And by 95, with the opening of the airport, I'd already done some upgrades at the Performing Arts Garage, and away we went. But I still a one-man shop, one guy in a truck.
So you were in Colorado Springs, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so most of your operation was up here. So you drove every day.
Every day.
Every day. Drove up to Denver. And let's see, the city of Denver garages was probably Ricky Gersh at the time.
Ricky,
pre-Ricky.
It was Pro Parkit or Park Pro or something like that. But then they lost it. It became Ricky was then there.
Ricky Gersh was there for
That's
a long
right.
time.
Yeah, and his favorite thing was, "Who's your buddy? Who's your pal?"
Yep.
So whenever he calls me, and he does occasionally, that's the first thing he'll say. I know exactly who this is. How you doing?
So you're working out of your garage still at this point?
Yes, in my truck. Eventually, we graduated where I had a storage locker, but yeah, that was it. One man in a truck.
One man in a truck, coming up to Denver, and then along comes somebody from Amco System Parking named Inga Hamilton.
Yeah, so I was at the Performing Arts, and I just did an upgrade there. So I had 4, 5, 6 of these printers that go in a 710, which I was mentioning earlier, and that's what she had. And so these were just so I refurbished it, and she said, "How much do you want for it?" So we sat there and had a cup of coffee talking, and I said, $250 or $275. She said, "Sold." And I thought, Oh,
Did I just shoot really
that
low?
That was too low, wasn't
Yeah.
it? She started laughing. She said, "Yeah, if you want to change your mind." And I said, "No, that's the deal.
Yeah.
I'll stick to it." And she was absolutely great.
And that was probably Newstedter's garage.
Absolutely.
Familiar with
not
Newstedter's,
where-
Danny? 15th and Stout.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
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 So that was Newstedter's.
Is that the current name of the garage still?
It is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think it's Global Pacific Parking.
Global Pacific, yeah.
Yeah. So so there was Inga, and then I remember that's when I met you during that time frame, because Inga worked for me, and we had some other repairs, and Barry Benware. You remember Barry Benware?
Absolutely.
Kind of an asset manager for Global Pacific. They didn't just do parking; they owned buildings, all kinds of stuff, and.
The Four Seasons occupies a space of real estate that Barry got for a very good deal for Newstead, for Global Pacific.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
He was very good.
Yes. And so there was a lot of pressure to keep things rolling from Barry. So it was like, Inga said, I got this Scott guy. He's working out of his garage. I'm like, well, get this Scott guy up here. We need to get this stuff fixed. So then we started seeing you more frequently.
Yes.
Because now all of a sudden the Scott guy fixed Newstedter, so we got Alamo, we got all these other things going on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I think along the timeline here, several years past, you wind up on Santa Fe. Tell us about that.
Yeah. How did you go from a one-man show traveling back and forth to Colorado Springs every day to ending up down on Santa Fe?
So the airport opened in 95, and that's when I was doing work at the Performing Arts Garage. Around 1998, I was awarded a contract for the city of Fort Collins. And so one man isn't going to cut it. So I hired my first guy, Ryan Welsh, who worked with me for 20 years or so.
Great guy.
Yeah. And then Ryan bought the family farm up in Dakotas and now works for Flash, right, as an engineer in the building side. So that was good. But anyway, so about 98, I hired Ryan, and then working with you, you got to tell the story where at Alamo Plaza,
Which we're all connected to, by the way.
we did some training on, they had federal APD ticket dispensers there. And anyone that's been around a long time is familiar with the TD-249. It had this little micro switch at the throat. And if there was a cut ticket that was in that throat, the buzzer would buzz and it wouldn't issue any more tickets. And so more than one time I get a call from someone over at Alamo Plaza saying,
And probably Newstedter's.
the ticket dispenser's not issuing any tickets. And I could hear the buzzer in the background. And so I would get over there and fix it. And after a few times, John thought, you know what? I thought you showed Bart how to fix this, but I want you to show me. And when I showed him, he was a little disappointed at how easy it was to fix that.
It was literally like a paper clip. It flips up and then, it makes the buzzing sound.
You didn't get in there and diagnose it yourself? I'm shocked.
Well, after that I did.
Yeah,
So-
because it was supposed to be Bart's job to keep that running. So from then on, if they would call me because I couldn't get a hold of John, I hear that buzzer, I would stop whatever I'm doing and drive there as quick as possible, because if he got there first, he fixed it and say,
No service call.
No service call.
We don't need the service call any longer.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So eventually, and I don't remember the exact, it's probably a little later, maybe 2000. I needed a place up here. In driving down Santa Fe one time, I saw this for lease sign at 300 Santa Fe, and so went in and talked to the person, started leasing this, and we leased it for a couple of years. And back at that time, you built your own computers for the systems. And so I'd build my computers, and there were guys in other industries that would stop by and have a beverage with me, and we would build computers at night and stuff and then work in the morning. But the problem was putting in the big pay stations that would come in on a bed, and we'd have to lower it to the ground, and it just wasn't convenient. So eventually I knew I had to find a place that had a loading dock.
So when did the mountain parking dynasty happen? Like, was it when you were a one-man show you decided I'm mountain parking? You were mountain parking when you were just Scott Souder, and then you carried that?
We started with electronic solutions. And I went to incorporate it, and they said, can't you do that? And you're standing there, I'm thinking, oh, how about Souder Corporation? And so they said, sure, that no one has that. So I took it, and then I didn't want it. Sounds, hi, I'm Scott Souder with Souder Corporation. So it was a DBA, mountain parking equipment, just kind of fell in because it's parking. But we've been called Mountain States Parking, Mountain Parking, Colorado, whatever. I don't care.
Whatever.
Colorado parking.
Colorado, yes.
Yeah.
So at this point, you decide you're going to take an even bigger leap in entrepreneurism.
Yes.
So now you're leasing a place on Santa Fe. You've got employees now. And so now you take a big plunge. You buy a building, which was the home, later became the home of this Dynasty Mountain Parking.
Yes.
And so what was that like? You had to go, you probably took a loan the size of, at the time.
To be honest with you, it was the most amazing thing. I'm driving around thinking I've got to find. So this is light industrial, and there's a sign out there that says for sale. So I went up and knocked on the door, went inside. I said, is the owner here? And she said, yeah, he's upstairs. I said, may I speak with him? And so his name was Mr. Wynn. And I went up to his room, and I said, so what are you asking for? It was this and the building next door. And he was looking for $750K. And I'm thinking, oh, I'll never be. So we just chatted a little bit, explained who I was, what I've been doing, why is he wanting to sell the building. And at the end of the meeting, I said, would you consider carrying the note? And he looked at me and said, I like you. I will carry the note. I go, how much do you need down? He said, $5,000. I said, $5,000? He said, yeah. So I got him a check for $5,000, and we started the process. Needless to say, his accountant, before we closed, needed more money. And then we got to the closing. He goes, you got to put at least 10% down. Come on. And I did. And by that time, I'd done a couple of other installations, had the lump sums, was able to pay for it. But I didn't know if I'd be able to sustain. So I sold the building next door in the afternoon, bought it in the morning. In the afternoon, I flipped the other side. And you think, wow, I made some money.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And then the IRS took every last nickel of that.
Wow, I didn't know that you bought the building next door.
Yeah, I sold it to a guy named Mike, and he's there still, and he's probably going to be selling his building in the next month or two.
So you went from your garage, leasing a building. By now, you're getting more clients.
Yes.
I think probably when you moved over there, you probably had the city of Denver.
Yep.
You got the city of Denver. You've got Central Parking. You've
City
got
of Fort Collins,
ABM.
City of Colorado Springs.
You've got pretty much everybody.
Yeah, and by the time we move over there, I've got maybe 4 or 5 employees. I mean, eventually we grew to where we had almost 20 people between sales, installation, service, that sort of thing.
So what was it like? You were wearing all the hats for a while.
It was
doing service calls, doing sales, doing proposals. Those were long hours, I remember.
Yeah, and working on the trucks. So eventually Zach convinced me to buy a bunch of Toyotas, new ones, so I wouldn't have to service the fleet anymore. I mean, when you're a one-man show, you cover all the hats.
So Zach Souder, who's now with Flash, which we're getting to, your son.
Yes.
And I remember Zach when he was probably 6 or 7 years old.
Well, I know
tagging along on some of those Alamo Plaza
in the summertime
reversible lane.
Yeah, I remember job sites where he was summer of his 12-year-old, and he's wearing a hard hat and a vest, and it's obvious that he's a little young. And we were on one job, and I saw the superintendent coming. I opened up the door and said, "You got to get in here." So he's in a porta toilet, right? So I'm talking to the GC. And Zach opens the door, goes back inside.
So what was it? When did you know that Zach was going to be in parking?
I really didn't. My daughter never really took to it, but Zach enjoyed the freedom. He went on and got his bachelor's degree in it's in business and finance, so it has nothing to do with parking. He's really good in that area. But he enjoyed, and so when he graduated, while he was going to college, he still worked with me. And when he graduated, he just kind of moved into it. And then eventually he earned the respect of all the staff, and he was the vice president.
So business and finance, that had to be pretty handy later on.
It was very handy. He's really good with spreadsheets.
I was going to say, it all makes sense now.
Yes.
If you've ever been on a call with Zach and he's screen sharing his spreadsheets, I'm like, you got to slow down.
Because I'm old school. I have a bucket You know, I keep track of the big numbers, what's flowing in, what's flowing out, who we need to invoice, who hasn't paid, that sort of thing. Zach gets it down to the dime.
Oh yeah, when we worked together, it was like, we need a spreadsheet, we'll send it to Zach.
Yeah.
Zach's got it.
Yeah, and he can multi-tabs, make those formulas just hum.
So now we're in Cherokee. That's where
Cherokee, yep.
which I drove by the other day. Talk about that later. But so you've got Zach, your son, now working there. You've
Yes.
got Mary down the hall doing the books.
Yep. She worked from home until the kids were the kids were home. And then when the kids got to elementary, she would still work at the house. And then maybe middle school, more high school, she would kind of come up a little bit. Then once they were both in college, then she started coming up all the time. And so down south, when we got here, we bought property and I built a house. And people say you can't build a house with your spouse because you'll kill each other. And we did that. And then we're in business together. And we would even commute up to Denver. No, we would commute to Denver together. So you have to get to where we're not going to talk about it on the weekends because it's just your whole life and you're always together.
Yeah, it's hard.
Well, that was going to be my next question with your son, being in the next hall over, in the next office, and then your wife right across the hall. And so all the expense reports probably flew through Mary.
Oh yeah,
So
there was
how
no.
how do you do business without
There's no underhanded anything because Mama's across the hall, right?
So now we've got you took your leap buying a building, you're expanding by this point. You've got probably when you were at Cherokee, you were still growing up 5-6 years ago. You probably had a staff of over 20, right?
Yeah. At one point, my main competition back in the day was Chuck, and Chuck was a one-man shop. I was a one-man shop. And the thing that we always heard from our clients like you are, when you're going on vacation or you go do something, or if you're working on a job, our stuff needs to be fixed. You gotta do something about it. And so you have to make that. And I sat and had talk to Chuck, and he's like, no. And I'm thinking, I got to do this because if I can grow and get enough people to service, 4-hour response time, that kind of thing, we could really take the market. And it sounds simple, but you get that much payroll, and I had no idea about the HR things that come up between employees that you have to solve. And I'd hear someone coming up the steps. They'd go down the hall, and I'm thinking, oh no. And they'd shut the door in Mary's office, and I'm thinking, whew, it's not me.
Yeah,
Poor
there's
Mary, she was
nothing
HR.
simple when you start getting over 20, 30 employees. And what another great family, I think it was Access and Time at one point.
Yeah.
Chuck, who also brought in his son.
Trey, love Trey.
Yep, great people. 2 iconic families in parking that go way back on the integrator. And I think, they're still going at it.
They're still going at it. Yeah. Trey's a great guy. And him and my son have ran into each other and had beers in Boulder on job sites where you lose a job and Zach's looking at another one, can smell Bondo. So he goes into the garage to see who's doing it. And there's Trey.
Thanks, Trey.
Right? So he's like, let me give you a hand and let's go get a beer. And so, it's kind of that.
That's pretty incredible because the two service providers when I first came into parking that I worked with was Mountain Parking and Trey.
Yeah.
I don't even know what his company is called, but it was Mountain Parking or Trey.
I think it was Access and Time
that was
way back
Chuck's.
when. And then I think it's Advanced Parking.
Something like that.
I always thought he was a one-man show, so it was.
Yeah, but there's times where if he's pulling wire on an install, Chuck would come and help him. And
so we're now 20 plus employees. Your son's thriving. You've got your wife down the hall checking every expense report. Things are rolling along. Yep. IRS is happy.
Oh,
you got your banker happy. Got money coming in. And then you've got this transition. You go through Amano to Tiba. Tell us what that was like.
That was hard. I had been with installing Amano equipment for 25 years or so. And so Zach says, we're always doing upgrades. There's new software. There's new things happening. And one of the things that really hurt us was when Amano went to build 18, we had to redo software and servers, and it was. I remember Dan Bergasa one time saying $45,000. It's like, it's not my fault. There's Windows, Amano, anyway. So Amano had done some new software, some new hardware, and it wasn't working real well. And there was a new player in town because Federal had been bought by 3M and they shuttered them. So people were looking for a product. And so Zach says, it's TIBA. I says, I don't know if I could do that. Zach flew to Israel, comes back with this dossier of all the main C-level, the product and all this stuff. And I'm still thinking, I don't know. I just can't do it. So we flew or went somewhere to look at it. I don't know. So then Zach convinced me. We flew to Columbus, Ohio. And because everyone in parking knows everyone, people that worked for TIBA, if I walked in that door, would know something's up. So he agreed to meet us over at the new office before anyone was there. And we met, we talked with him again. And I said, yeah, we'll sign. So when we got back from lunch, we signed our distributorship with TIBA. And Columbus, Ohio is where I'm from. Took Zach to see the family cemetery where my grandfather and my great-grandfather are all buried and all the cousins. So then as we were there in the afternoon, then other people started showing up for whatever reason. And they're like, Souder's here. I saw Zach. Oh, Mary's in the lunchroom. Oh, the Souders are coming.
Something's going
so
down.
We had to tell them, do not say anything. So the next week, I flew to Minneapolis to tell Larry Fuhrer personally that we were taking on TIBA.
Wow. So that was a tough decision because you were
Yes.
in that network for a long time.
Yes.
And when we refer to network, there's a lot of dealers across the country,
Yes.
integrators that
Yes.
were in that network. So it wasn't probably just about the Amano organization. It was probably all those families that you got used to seeing at the cruises and the shows. And
Yeah, we had an association, and when I was in France, I got a call from the guy who was the president of the association and said, I'm leaving because I'm going to TIBA. And I'm thinking, this was part of after Zach and the whole thing. And I said, I'm thinking about it. I'm still on the fence. And he said, but now you're the president of the organization. And I'm thinking, oh, no. And so when I got back, here I am the president, and then Clint becomes the vice president. And within a short period of time, 5 of us all left and went to TIBA from Amano, which was a big hurt.
Yeah, that was a big transition. And I think Larry retired.
Yes, he did.
I think he probably said, wow, this is too much. And
After
been
all
in
the-
it a long time.
He yelled at me for an hour straight. And when it was finally over, I left my jacket in Minnesota in February just to go out to my car and get on the plane. It was pretty stressful. I've had several conversations with Larry since then. He called the day we closed on selling our building.
Well, you were very, very honorable, I'm sure, in the way you did that.
He recognized, he goes, you never come to my office. So either, I can't remember what the first thing is, and then he shut his door and he says, or you're switching product lines. And I said, yeah. And they said they could hear out in the warehouse of manufacturing because they knew Souder. I'd come in, I have to say hi to the girl at the front desk. Souder's here, there's yelling in Larry's office. This isn't good.
So now we're on the TIBA train, and that's
train.
rolling.
And trying to keep our customers who have Amano, we have inventory. I can still service your stuff. And for most of them, we could, but
we could probably spend an entire show on how difficult the transition was with your customers at that point.
Yeah.
But you go a few years and then decide there's another vision, and here comes the flash train.
Zach was absolutely correct with the TIBA. So when he started talking about flash this time, I was more open because of what he's got a track record now. And this time with flash, we go and meet the CEO, Dan and Sam, and we're at a bar, brew pub in Denver, and they're telling me the vision and what they want to do. And I'm thinking, He goes, and so we don't want you to sell our product. We want to buy you. I'm like, okay. Numbers? He goes, well, we'll get to that, right? And so we did get to negotiations. The first hour meeting was just to say hi. This is who we are. This is what we want to do. Yeah, but what about Zach? They go, we want Zach, right? So we're going to let you retire. I'm thinking, that's what I want too. I'm good.
So the ultimate transition. So you sell your company that you built, started out from your garage.
Yes.
And now the company that buys your company becomes you become the landlord because you still own the building.
Yes.
And I think now you've sold the building. So you are completely out of parking, out of being a landlord.
Yes.
And I think I was in there the day or the week that you were wrapping things up and you knew you were selling the building and you were talking about how you were going to get everything out. And we went out to the warehouse and I have a picture of it that I'll share, but it was kind of sad for me.
Yeah, sure.
Mountain parking was just anything you're talking about parking in Denver, it's like mountain parking. And here I'm looking at this warehouse that's completely dark. And you look over and there's a sign. It just says park, and it was on. It was like the only thing that was on in the whole warehouse. It was like it was
surreal.
Good for you, but it was surreal looking at it. I still look at that picture. So, what a success story. Starting out, and parking's been good to you. Right?
Yeah, it has, and I think that our operators like you and Dani, and I think of Chris and Ricky and Dan Burgos. I mean, the list goes on and on and on because everyone had a part to play in it and held my feet to the fire. And when they would go and talk to the property managers like a Laura or someone, they would allow me to go along. They had enough confidence that I wasn't going to share information. And it was a really good run. And Denver came from cash to online, state of the art, and it's just
software now
flying forward. Yeah.
So if you had to, there's young people that are probably listening, and they're starting their careers in parking, and you're somebody that's now sold your company to Flash. Your son works for Flash. Flash is a great company. So what would you say to some entrepreneur out there that if you had to, what was maybe 2 or 3 bullet points of the challenges, and obviously looking back, tell us how it feels to be.
Well, just know that if you're going to be an entrepreneur, there's going to be some long hours, but it's well worth it because then you get to call the shots, and there's a lot of possibilities right now. There's easier ways to write code and work with chipsets if you want to make your own little splash, a little niche in parking, but you need to get involved with it to understand what information, because the statistical data, the financial data is critical to everyone, and everyone figures out a different way to get it. Now you've got the QR codes that we were in Milwaukee and we're going to park somewhere and I took a picture. I'm getting ready to fill it out and Zach's like, no, parking's $5 cheaper down the block and it's a different company and I want to do it. And my wife's like,
so he went for cheaper parking.
He went for cheaper
and convenient price and security
pricing. Yep. And it was a barcode down there, which he saw on his phone.
I still believe in brand loyalty, Conway.
So it was availability that you would, back in the day, we didn't know what people were going to charge you for parking. We didn't know where there was available parking. Whereas today, I can get on there, and I don't want to mention brands, but I know where to go, how much it's going to cost.
That was an inside, because we could designate a whole show to branding.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I just believe parking is people park where it's convenient, price driven, and safety. Yeah. And I don't think from a consumer standpoint, there's brand loyalty. I think there's B2B brand loyalty for sure, unless you're in an airport or some kind of hospitality situation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But we'll leave that for another.
Yeah,
and so that's another show.
And so, I've, as a young person, talk to those around you. What do they like about parking? No one likes parking.
Nobody likes
parking. What makes
it
more convenient? What would they like to see? And then look around and see if you see it. And if you don't, that's wide open for you. You should do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
what's your parting words as we wind up this episode to the industry?
It's been a good run. The industry's been good to me. There's a lot of great people out there. I feel like when people win awards, they want to talk and just list all the names, and I could go on for probably 5 minutes, name after name after name of people I've known, been kind to me, helped me out, bought product from, things like that. And so it's been a really good run, and I'm very appreciative of people like you who have helped me along. And we're just going to ride off into the sunset. You know, it's nice.
Yes, it is.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, you especially have had such a huge impact in the industry across the board, right? You were one of the first people that I met in my parking career, and certainly would not be where I am without your knowledge, without your team's knowledge. I mean, just all incredible humans across the board at Mountain Parking. And Casey will laugh when she hears this because I rave about Mountain Parking all the time. And those are the industry standards that I hold every, tech to is Mountain Parking. Those are the industry standards. And if you can't provide the quality and service levels of Mountain Parking, I don't want it.
I appreciate it. I would say, you know what? You did it right, buddy.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody I've talked to in this industry or come along that has known you has ever said one bad word about you. You're one of those people that everyone loves and respects, and people can only hope to have the kind of success that you and your family have had. And I think it's great. I think you're a blueprint, or definitely a success story for people to look at and model themselves if they want to be.
Thank you both very much. I'm humbled by that.
And don't be a stranger.
Yeah.
NPA's coming up, New Orleans. You're probably
That's where I got my "You're no longer an Amano distributor" letter from Alan, who is at Flash now.
Parking still has parties at the show, so don't be a stranger.
You got to make an appearance.
You have to make an appearance once in a while.
Yeah, it would be fun to go back and see everyone. Zach sent me pictures of people that are with different companies now, and they're all sitting around talking about parking. Here's a picture of you. Here we are, and we're talking about you, Dad. Remember, and they're telling me stories, and I quickly text them and say, "Don't tell them about and forget that."
Well, I always tell Zach, he's like, "Hey, you want to go to happy hour?" I'm like, "Only if Scott's there."
Oh yeah. Thank you so much. We do enjoy getting together because that's what it is. We become friends.
Absolutely.
We're not just clients. We're all friends.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm thinking about this episode, and I'm like, I could sit here for another hour because we could branch off.
There are so many stories.
We could branch off so many stories.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for the pleasure to come here and to share this time with you. It's always a pleasure and great, and I'll try not to stay away.
Yeah. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much. And Dani, we'll see you on the next go around.
We'll see you on the next episode.
All right.